This week saw the release of the first new State of Play since March, and it brought a ton of news on some of the biggest third-party games on the horizon, as well as our first real look at several games coming to PSVR 2. I'll give my full thoughts on the showcase at the end of this video, but right now we have 15 games to talk about, so let's dive right into it. This State of Play opened with a massive bang, with the reveal of Resident Evil 4's long-rumoured remake. There are very few things that could start a showcase in a more exciting way than a remake of one of the best games of all time. This reveal trailer gave us a glimpse at some of Resident Evil 4's most iconic moments, like Leon approaching the first house at the start of the game, and Leon entering Resident Evil 4's nightmarish village for the first time, all recreated beautifully for modern hardware. Resident Evil 4 was a huge leap forward for the Resident Evil series, and it's one of my favourite games of all time. It's also one of the games I've revisited the most over the years, and to this day, it still holds up. So this remake has a lot to live up to. But I think Capcom have proved that they're up to the task with how great their recent Resident Evil remakes have been. In fact, I think Resident Evil 2 Remake is the best Resident Evil game ever. And thankfully, Capcom seem to be perfectly nailing the atmosphere of Resident Evil 4 so far in this remake. This trailer also closed out by announcing that PSVR 2 content is also in development for Resident Evil 4 Remake, and I'm very excited to see how that turns out as well. With this announcement, Resident Evil 4 Remake has skyrocketed right up my most anticipated games list. The Resident Evil news kept rolling with the announcement that Resident Evil Village is being ported to PSVR 2, which was of course revealed with a trailer showcasing Lady Dimitrescu's section of Village in VR. Capcom know their audience after all. This port makes a lot of sense, seeing as Resident Evil 7 was fully playable in PSVR. That was a very immersive and extremely stressful way to experience Resident Evil 7, so I have no doubt that playing Resident Evil Village in VR will raise the game's fear factor by quite a few notches. And this time around, Capcom have clearly modified the game more heavily to tailor it for VR, with this VR version of Village including new mechanics like dual wielding and the ability to toss items between your hands, which is a big leap forward from Resident Evil 7's VR version, which still had to be played with a DualShock. Resident Evil Village was one of my favourite games of 2021, so I'm 100% down to revisit it in a new form. The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners is one of the best received VR games in recent memory, so confirmation that its sequel will also be making its way to PlayStation platforms is welcome news. I know lots of people have gotten burnt out on this franchise, but I love the world of The Walking Dead. I've read all of the comics, seen every season of the show, and played nearly every Walking Dead video game, with the big exception being Saints and Sinners, because I was already over hooking up the original PSVR by the time it came out. So I'm really excited to check out Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 when it hits PSVR 2. This gore-filled shooter looks like a great time, allowing you to tear through hordes of walkers with a huge variety of melee weapons and firearms. Saints and Sinners 2 will let you tackle situations however you like. If you're a more tactical player who likes a stealthy approach, you can skulk around, picking off walkers with headshots from a silenced gun. But if you're more drawn to a head-on approach, you can throw caution to the wind and charge straight at a horde of walkers with a chainsaw. Saints and Sinners Chapter 2 will make its debut on the original PSVR and other VR platforms later this year, before an improved version releases on PSVR 2 in 2023. Next up is everyone's favourite gaming redemption story, No Man's Sky. After a tumultuous launch, No Man's Sky had one impressive comeback. No Man's Sky's many updates have turned it from a largely reviled game to a beloved fan favourite that's only continuing to get better and better. One of the biggest updates for No Man's Sky saw the addition of VR support, so a new version for PSVR 2 is a no-brainer. No Man's Sky also seems like a game that could make great use of the PSVR 2's new controllers. If they nail the haptic feedback for flight, it could bring a whole new level of immersion to No Man's Sky. The VR section of the showcase closed out with a look at Sony's big first-party showpiece for PSVR 2, Horizon Call of the Mountain. I thought this game looked amazing. Horizon seems like the perfect franchise to give a VR spin-off because it will allow you to get a grasp of the scale of Horizon's monstrous machines in a way that's only possible in VR. Call of the Mountain is translating a lot of Horizon's mechanics to VR, and I was glad to see that it's seemingly more of a full-fledged game than just a quick VR experience. We got a look at the protagonist scaling mountains, platforming between ledges, and fighting off machines with a bow like Aloy would in the mainline Horizon games, and it all looked great. My only concern is that Call of the Mountain seemingly has a lot of movement, and I hope they've managed to find a way to prevent this from being nauseating. Thankfully, for those who are particularly susceptible to motion sickness, the PlayStation blog has an article on this game that details another mode called the River Ride experience, which is seemingly a more laid back and less involved experience than the main game. This mode could also be a great way to let your friends and family who aren't gamers dip their toes into VR without getting too overwhelmed. Sticking on the Horizon train, a huge new update for Horizon Forbidden West was shadow dropped during this state of play, and it adds a whole host of exciting new content and improvements to the game. These new additions include enhanced visuals in Forbidden West's performance mode, new weapons, gear transmog, which allows you to change the appearance of your outfits, so you're not stuck wearing the worst looking gear just because it has the best stats, and the ability to redistribute your skill points. But the biggest additions in this update are the new ultra hard difficulty and New Game Plus, with new trophies also being added to give a tantalising reason to jump back into Forbidden West. This was the perfect time for this update. There's not many new games releasing right now, so it's a great time to revisit one of the year's best games so far. We know recently Sony have been porting some of their PS4 back catalogue to PC, and in 2022, PC players will be getting Sony's biggest PC port yet, with Marvel's SpiderMan set to hit PC in August. SpiderMan is one of the PS4's very best games, and I'm glad that a whole new audience are going to be able to experience it. I adore this game. The web swinging in Spider-Man is far and away the most fun form of traversal I've ever experienced in a game, and as a huge comic nerd, I'd argue that this is the best adaptation we've seen of Spider-Man himself outside of the comics. Yuri Lowenthal is just perfect in the role. And even more good news for PC gamers is that the PlayStation blog confirmed that the also incredible Spider-Man Miles Morales will also be coming to PC at some point later this year. Next up, we finally got a release date for the delightful looking indie game Stray. This game has appeared at several PlayStation shows since it was unveiled at the PlayStation 5 showcase back in 2020, and it's been a highlight of every showcase it's appeared at. Stray sees you guiding its feline protagonist through a world populated solely by robots, as they solve puzzles and platform their way through the environment to find a way back to their family. While this is Blue 12 Studios' first game, so it's hard to predict how Stray will pan out, it is being published by Annapurna Interactive, who have a largely great track record of seeking out only the highest quality indie games to publish. Every time we've seen Stray, I've been taken back by just how charming it looks, and blown away by how perfectly Blue 12's animators have captured the movements and mannerisms of a cat, something I'm sure all my fellow cat owners have also noticed. Another big piece of news announced alongside the release date is that Stray will be available at no extra cost for subscribers to the new extra and premium tiers of PlayStation Plus, which is great news as it'll hopefully get even more eyes on Stray. Another game we've been hanging out for a release date for was the Callisto Protocol, and at this state of play, we finally got it. And the best news of all is that it's coming sooner than I expected. The Callisto Protocol will be releasing on the 2nd of December this year. Seeing as we've seen little more than a CGI trailer for this game, I really thought that the Callisto Protocol might get delayed to 2023. The Callisto Protocol is a spiritual successor to the Dead Space franchise, and it's being headed up by Glenn Schofield, one of the co-creators of Dead Space. The first two Dead Space games are among my favourite horror games of all time, so I've been eagerly anticipating the Callisto Protocol, and the gameplay we saw at this state of play did not disappoint. Callisto seems to have a tense, oppressive atmosphere, and all the grisly body horror and horrific creature design you could hope for in a spiritual successor to Dead Space. Unsurprisingly, the Callisto Protocol's gameplay looks a lot like Dead Space, from the way that alien creatures are dismembered in combat, right down to the indicator on the back of the protagonist that shows how much health you have. And these similarities are definitely a good thing in my book. Dead Space had been left dormant for way too long before the announcement of its remake last year, so I'm more than ready for more games of its ilk. Interestingly, while the Callisto Protocol was originally announced to be part of the PUBG universe, that's no longer the case, which I think is a great call. I think it's far more exciting for this new IP to be completely standalone with no baggage tied to it. Rollerdrome was a fun and unexpected surprise out of this state of play. This new game from Ollie developer Roll7 looks like what you'd get if you crossed Jet Set Radio or Tony Hawk's Pro Skater with an arena shooter, then gave it the gorgeous cel-shaded art style of Sable, and it looks every bit as awesome as that premise sounds. Roller skating around these environments and skating along walls while mowing down enemies with dual pistols looks so fun. I just hope that Rollerdrome feels as good to play as it looks like it does. I was also pleasantly surprised to see that Rollerdrome is releasing in August. It's always nice seeing a game revealed and knowing that you'll be playing it in just a couple of months' time. I would love to see Sony get Rollerdrome into the PS Plus Extra tier at launch. It seems like it'd be a great get for subscribers, but also a good way to get this game a solid player base from the jump, which is always the biggest struggle for a multiplayer game. The strangest game to come out of this state of play was without a doubt Eternites, a new action game dating sim hybrid. The stylish hack and slash action of Eternites seems to have a good amount of variety to it, featuring multiple playable characters and even vehicle sections that see you fighting off enemies while riding a motorcycle. The dungeon crawling action is punctuated by downtime where you'll spend time with your allies to strengthen your bonds with them, and you'll have to carefully manage how you spend your time as there's an in-game calendar that progresses as you play. This of course made me immediately think of one of my favourite franchises, Persona. And it turns out there's a good reason for these similarities to Persona. I took a look at Studio Sai's Twitter account today, and immediately saw a tweet from the studio head, where he stated that he was so inspired after playing through the Persona series that he quit his job to pursue game development. Eternites has some major Bandai Namco and Platinum Games vibes to it, and with Scarlet Nexus being one of my favourite games of 2021, I'm definitely in the mood for another great anime-inspired action game, and I'm hoping Eternites can be that game. Next, Capcom made another big splash by giving us our first look at gameplay for Street Fighter VI, and I've gotta say, I think this game looks remarkable. Street Fighter VI is a visual spectacle. The character models are some of the best we've ever seen in Street Fighter, and I love the splashes of paint that accompany special attacks. The fights look jaw-dropping all around. I love how fast and fluid combos look, while still giving strikes a nice heft to them, and it's great to see the return of Third Strike's parries. I think Capcom chose perfectly when it came to selecting the 4 characters that would be showcased in this trailer. We got the return of 2 classic characters with Chun-Li and Ryu, a look at a new character in the Drunken Master style fighter Jamie, and we of course saw Luke, the final DLC character for Street Fighter V, who was designed to be a character that bridges Street Fighter V and 6, which is such an awesome idea. But the aspect of Street Fighter VI that this trailer got me the most pumped for is the story mode. This open world story mode with a fully explorable city is by far the most ambitious single player campaign we've ever seen in a Street Fighter game, and I think it's exactly what the series needed. When it comes to single player content in fighting games, NetherRealm have been absolutely trouncing everyone else with their excellent Mortal Kombat and Injustice story modes, so it's about time we saw another studio put their focus back onto a fighting game story mode. It was also a relief to see a new logo for Street Fighter VI, replacing that awful stock logo from the first trailer. After launching on Xbox and PC earlier in the year, indie darling Tunic is finally making its way to PlayStation consoles in September. This beautiful looking Zelda-like game starring a fox was made by a single developer, which is honestly pretty hard to comprehend when you see how good this game looks. Tunic has been on my backlog for months. It's installed on my Xbox ready to go, and I think seeing it again here was the push I needed to finally jump in. I've heard a lot of great things about Tunic, and I think the way that it teaches you new mechanics by having you discover pages of an instruction manual that looks like it's been ripped straight out of the NES era is a very clever and novel concept. Season: A Letter to the Future is the new game from Scavengers Studio, who previously developed Battle Royale The Darwin Project, and I don't think it would be possible to make a game that's a further departure from the Darwin Project than Season is set to be. this serene and heartfelt narrative adventure game sees you riding a bike through nature, taking pictures, and recording different snippets of audio with a microphone. Season piqued my interest when we first saw it at the Game Awards in 2020. It has a very chill vibe to it, and it's another game with an amazing art style. Unfortunately, it is worth noting that the narrative around this game shifted last year after a GamesIndustry.biz article detailed countless allegations of harassment and abuse against one of the studio's co-CEOs. Fortunately, this person was suspended at the time and his role in the game has been greatly decreased, so hopefully the studio's workplace culture has significantly improved in the year since. This state of play opened with a bang, so you knew it had to end with one, and that it did, with this state of play closing out with a new trailer for Final Fantasy XVI, which not only gave us a meaty look at gameplay, but also gave us a release window of summer 2023. I love Final Fantasy, so I've been champing at the bit to see more of this game. I thought the reveal trailer for Final Fantasy XVI was remarkable, and I'm glad to say that this new trailer had me constantly hyped throughout. There's good reason to be excited for Final Fantasy XVI, as the project is being developed by Square Enix Creative Development Unit 3, the team who developed Final Fantasy XIV, which many Final Fantasy fans argue has the greatest story of any Final Fantasy game. I'm sold on everything we've seen of Final Fantasy XVI so far. Its combat looks fast and fluid, its dark fantasy world is gorgeous, and the music is as impeccable as you'd expect a Final Fantasy score to be. That remix of the Final Fantasy theme in this trailer was just incredible. I'm always struck by just how violent and tonally dark Final Fantasy XVI looks. This combined with its themes of war always makes me think of Final Fantasy Type 0 when I see Final Fantasy XVI. It seems like summons are going to play a bigger role in Final Fantasy XVI than they have in any prior Final Fantasy game, as you'll actually be directly controlling these gigantic creatures for the first time, which basically seems like a way to bring kaiju battles to the Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy XVI looks absolutely spectacular, and it's already one of my most anticipated games of 2023. And there you have it. That's everything that was shown at the June 2022 State of Play. I think it's fair to say that this was easily the best State of Play we've gotten yet. It gave us plenty of reasons to be excited for PSVR 2, and gave us new looks at some of the most anticipated third-party games on the horizon, while also giving us a couple of great surprises along the way. Capcom were absolutely the MVPs of this showcase, with Resident Evil 4 and Street Fighter 6 totally stealing the show for me. This State of Play was immaculately paced. Every game was clearly placed where it was in the showcase for good reason, which made the show flow perfectly. There was also a perfect balance of huge heavy hitters and smaller but equally impressive looking indie games. The only downside to this showcase is that so many of the games shown are slated for 2023, which still leaves the back half of 2022 looking very barren. I'm really hoping that Summer Game Fest Kickoff Live and the Xbox and Bethesda showcase can help fill out the release calendar for the rest of the year, because right now things are looking pretty grim, especially when it comes to big AAA releases. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, because I'll be making recap and review videos for all of the big showcases dropping in June, including Summer Game Fest Kickoff Live and the Xbox and Bethesda showcase. I also post countless game reviews on my channel, including my recent reviews of Elden Ring, Pokemon Legends Arceus, and Horizon Forbidden West. And keep an eye out for my upcoming reviews of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, and Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin.